It's Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. I'm Dave Heiliger, filling in for the good doc today. It's Wisdom Wednesday. Here we go.
Live from our nation's capital, welcome to Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. An expert on race, religion, and relationships, Dr. Anderson wants to talk to you. Our phone lines are now open. 888-432-7434. And now, please welcome Dr. David Anderson, your bridge-building voice in the nation's capital.
Well, it's not quite Dr. David Anderson here today for you, but you got Dave Heiliger, a different Dave, on the line for you. I'm David Heiliger. I serve as the Director of Gracism Global underneath Dr. Anderson's leadership, and I am filling in for Dr. Anderson as he's off traveling today. But you got me, and I can't wait for our show today. We've got a great discussion topic, really picking up where Dr. Anderson and his guest, Miss Jasmine Lee, left off yesterday, really looking at the shooting in Buffalo over the weekend. You know, they talked about the experience of Jasmine's cousin right there at the Tops Grocery Market, and today is Wisdom Wednesday, and we're going to be looking at the wisdom of understanding the ideology of that gunman. So we're going to dive right into that topic. But I just wanted to say hello. You know, wherever you're listening in from, whether you're in your car, at your desk, at your office, if you're at home, or maybe you're on some beach somewhere with a drink with an umbrella in it, that's where I want to be this weekend, but you're there already listening to us. Thank you for joining us. We're broadcasting on WAVA here in the nation's capital, 105.1. But I know some of you are watching online, and you can watch online right now on Facebook or YouTube on Dr. Anderson's accounts. You can find that at Anderson Speaks. So if you're seeing me for the first time, hi, this is what I look like. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Thanks for logging in. You can even talk to me in the chat box, and I will be able to see what you're saying throughout our conversation. So thanks a ton for joining us online if that's you. You know, here on Real Talk, we get to do something different every day. We run it down through like this. We got Marriage Mondays, Tough Topic Tuesdays, Wisdom Wednesdays, that's today, Theological Thursdays, and Friday is Open Phone In Friday. And that's where you get to call in and talk to Dr. Anderson about anything and everything on your mind. So can't wait for you guys to throw him some curveballs this Friday. Well, this is a call-in talk show, so I want to hear from you. You can call in 888-432-7434, 888-432-7434. So if you heard yesterday's conversation about the Buffalo shooting and you didn't quite get a chance to speak up and share what you were thinking about, today is a day where you can call and talk to me. I can't wait to hear from you and hear some of your thoughts. We're going to do a little bit more thinking about this shooter and what his ideology was and is as he carried out that horrific attack. But we're going to start out with a little bit of prayer and ask God's blessing over our time. So let's pray, everybody. Dear Jesus, thank you. Thank you for a chance to get together all over the place, right here on this talk show, so we can look to you for wisdom, and Lord, specifically wisdom as we look to understand some of what we heard, experienced, read about from this past weekend. Lord, I pray that you would bless this show. I pray that you would bless the people listening. And Lord, for all those that are mourning and hurting, Lord, I pray that you would be their peace. Amen and amen. Again, this is Wisdom Wednesday. We're going to be talking about the wisdom of understanding the Buffalo shooter's ideology, specifically asking, was he a lone wolf out there acting alone, or is he part of a larger, more common ideological pack? How do we understand him in his actions to maybe help us understand this larger issue that our nation is facing with racial abuse, racial damage, racial disparity, the destruction around it, and horrific killings like we saw this past weekend. So call in, talk to me about it. I want to hear from you. Was this just a lone wolf acting on his own, or can we understand that he's a representative of a more common ideological pack? You can find us on all sorts of social medias, and I hope you follow us there. I'm the director of Gracism Global. Dr. Anderson is leading this brand new organization where we're looking to build bridges across the deepest divides of color, class, and culture, taking the work of Dr. Anderson's writings on Gracism and expanding it all over the world. Gracism Global, you can find us online at gracismglobal.com, or you can find us on Instagram at Gracism Global. Dr. Anderson's socials are at Anderson Speaks, and you can find him on all sorts of platforms there. But if you go to gracismglobal.com, you can find Dr. Anderson's book, Gracism, in audiobook form for free. Just scroll down to the bottom and you can download it, get access to it right there. It's been an honor working with Dr. Anderson around the work of Gracism, because this is what I feel like is what we need the most right now in our culture. When so many people are experiencing division, damage, and disparity around issues of race, even highlighted in the horrific killings of this weekend, Gracism works to build these bridges across these deep divides. It's really looking to see difference as something that's essential, something that we love about each other, something that's celebrated, rather than something that is feared and is seen as a threat. But what we saw this past weekend was something really, really terrible. In the middle of the afternoon on May 14th, on Saturday, a mass shooting was carried out in Buffalo, New York, at a neighborhood grocery store called Tops Friendly Market. This is in Buffalo, New York. 10 people were killed. 10 people. It was 3 others were injured. 11 of the victims were black. The 18-year-old male gunman was taken into custody by police unharmed. And before this man carried out this mass murder, he wrote an extensive manifesto where he goes into his views on white supremacy. Oh my goodness. Can you, I honestly, as a white man, can't imagine the ripple effects that a shooting like this and murders like this create throughout not just the Buffalo community of African Americans, but all across the nation. People now who have maybe sensed a little bit of security in different areas of their life, now when they walk into a grocery store, know that in Buffalo there's a targeting of African Americans, a targeting of black people for death, as they were doing something as mundane, something as normal, something as everyday life as walking through a grocery store. But now there's this cloud of fear even around something like that. And today we're going to really talk about the shooter's mentality, not just mentality, but his ideology. And maybe that's where we can see a difference, the difference between mentality and ideology. Mentality is thinking about how somebody thinks. Ideology is more of this system of beliefs. So what I want you to do is call in, talk to me about this. I want to hear your thoughts about this guy. Was he a lone wolf? Was he part of a larger ideological pack? We'll talk to you in a little bit.
When asked the question raised by her professor, "Why are you here at Omega Graduate School?" Sebla Diglu-Hailu answered in one of her essays like this: "I was not there just to add a prefix to my name, though that would feel good. The greater purpose of my preparation at OGS is to fulfill my mandate to be a change agent. The doctoral study is a time of preparation for me to see and to think, to understand the times, and to craft my way in fulfilling my calling." Sebla Diglu-Hailu, a current Doctor of Philosophy student from Ethiopia, is a counselor and adjunct psychology professor who hosts a weekly radio show in the capital city of Ethiopia and is an advocate for empowering women and children. What is your profession, and how can OGS help you grow to the next level in your graduate education? Dr. Dr. David Anderson is the new chancellor of Omega Graduate School, formerly known as Oxford Graduate School, and your education as a working adult is important to him, to God, and to all who will be changed in the world because of your important research. Go to ogs.edu today and apply, or call 1-800-933-6188.
Best Buy waterproofing before the water rises.
Are you tired of living in that smelly basement? Well, let me tell you something. Amber and I had some basement issues. We called Best Buy Waterproofing. They came and they helped us out. If you have mold, mildew, cracks, blistered paint in your walls, or you're just not quite sure if your basement is altogether safe, then call Best Buy Waterproofing. Just go to bestbuywaterproofing.com. They have over 30 years of experience, and they'll even donate $500 to my show if you end up doing business with them. But most of all, get your basement fixed. Give them a call, 844-980-3707. That's 844-980-3707.
Best Buy waterproofing before the water rises.
Welcome back to Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. For more information about this program or for resources from Dr. Anderson, please visit andersonspeaks.com. To watch on Facebook Live or to view past episodes, visit Dr. Anderson's public figure Facebook page. Just search Dr. David Anderson and click like. You can also watch live on YouTube. Just search for Anderson Speaks, all one word, and make sure to subscribe. Join our text community and receive a free weekly textpiration from Dr. Anderson. Just text the word INSPIRE to 97000. That's INSPIRE to 97000. And now, back to Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson.
Well, not quite Dr. David Anderson, but you've got David Heiliger on here, filling in for Dr. Anderson today as he's out. But I'm standing in, and I'm the director of Gracism Global, Dr. Anderson's organization that looks to build bridges across deep divides of color, class, and culture in businesses, in academic institutions, through politics, in law enforcement. We're doing some really great work all around the world looking to take the message of Gracism into different industries. So, Doc, we miss you, but we can't wait for you to be back. In the meantime, today's Wisdom Wednesday, and we're talking about the wisdom of understanding the Buffalo Shooters ideology. The Buffalo Shooters ideology. So what I want to hear from you as you call in, was this shooter acting as a lone wolf, or is he part of a larger ideological pack? All right. And one question we can ask ourselves to help us navigate this a little bit is there a difference between mentality and ideology? You tell me, is there a difference between mentality and ideology? You think about the mentality, and we look at something like this, and we see him killing and just horrific attack based on his racist views. His mentality was death, destruction, and verbal abuse. It was violence. That's his mentality. It's really the way he thinks, how he acts. That's his mentality. And I think if we just write this guy off as a lone wolf, somebody who is mentally unstable, or one person who's got evil in his heart, that really limits our chance to look at what patterns might exist across a number of different people who have carried out really, really terrible racist attacks. But if we dive a little bit deeper into his ideology, this is the system of ideas that he has built up and fleshed out that really are the foundation to his heinous acts. And we know that there's white supremacy in there, but can we dive a little bit deeper into that, to pull that apart a little bit, to really understand what is this guy's ideology and what can we pick up about this that might help us see these patterns that exist beyond just this one act? So we've got some callers already calling in. You can call in and talk to me about this, 888-432-7434, and I'd love to hear from you. But we're going to start out with Anonymous on the line, and I'd love to hear what you think. Anonymous from Silver Spring, can you hear me?
Yes. Hello. Thank you.
Thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Yeah, that was a great show yesterday. And now we're discussing the difference between mentality and ideology. And it reminds me of Corinthians, where it says that we don't deal with flesh and blood, but principalities and powers. So I'm thinking, from my Bible studies, maybe it's like a negative spirit that is working in this boy, 18 years old. He's not even old enough to have a real mentality or ideology, I don't think. But
yeah, and so
and
it seems like you're adding on this third piece. I said mentality and ideology, and you're talking about spirituality. Maybe there's this spiritual oppressive force that's over him that's creating kind of a gross amount of evil to grow up inside of this young man. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. I wish I could say it in those words.
No, I caught it from you. And so somebody like that, and how do you think that ties into the specific race-based killing here? That, there are lots of people who might say, man, there's evil growing up in their heart, and there are a lot of people that are out there killing other folk. But for you, when you look at that kind of evil that's growing up inside of somebody, but then it's channeled into specific race-based hatred, how do you combine those two things in your mind?
Well, I study history, and back around the 1900s, there was a political party called the Know Nothings, KNOW, Nothings, and they disliked any immigration. I mean, this was 100 years ago, but we're still doing dislike and distrust of others. And I think that what happened what that boy with his mentality and ideology did in Buffalo on Saturday was a convenient, it's easy in this country to hate people. And then when you have a president like Trump that encouraged it and said people in Charlottesville were good and bad, then yeah.
So you're saying it fits into sorry, go ahead.
It's an old pattern in this country, and certainly African Americans have been hated before for no good reason. Kidnapped from their own country, brought over here to work and make millionaires of many Southerners. And so what do we white people do in the South and the North? We hate them.
Wow.
Because of things like Birth of a Nation, and the rise of the KKK, the re-rise of it. We're messed up.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and I think what you're saying, what I hear you saying is there is a pattern here, and there is a pattern of people in the United States, specifically people in power, historically have been white, who have targeted that hatred toward people of color, immigrants, African Americans, and that has fleshed itself out in channeling maybe that spirituality, that spiritual evil that's rising up in him into a pattern of hatred toward people of color. Anonymous, thank you so much for calling in. I really appreciate you joining us today. Yeah, I think that is really, really important to recognize, that when we start talking about this one man, if we just limit it to talking about him, then we're not zooming out far enough to get a picture of how he fits into a wider story of abuse toward specifically people of color and immigrants and people of African descent. Wow. I think somebody can believe, this gunman, I think he's been groomed by the pervasive belief that the prevalence, power, and progress of Black and other cultural minorities is a threat to American and white prosperity. Maybe the prosperity of America or the prosperity of white America is threatened, or there's a threat to it when there's a rise of African American or Black or cultural minorities in prevalence, in their power, and in their progress. And so if they see that kind of progress as a threat, then the acting out of that might look different. And so his acting out of it, his mentality that kind of went into how he carried it out was through violence and destruction and mass murder. But could it be possible that other people carry this same ideology, where you see the influx of people who are not white American, you see that as a threat? Maybe you see them as invaders, and then the response to that is an exclusiveness, an exclusion of those people. And so that's something I think we'd be wise to explore and wise to deal with. So I want to hear from you on this. Again, you can call in 888-432-7434. Question that we're going to get into is, there's also, I'm not sure if you've read any of the headlines recently, specifically as they pulled apart this manifesto. This shooter, when he was taken in, they went into his house and looked at his computers, and they found a manifesto, over 100 pages of him explaining his own ideology. Did you guys check that out? Did you read any of it? Did you see any highlights of it? I'm sure it's... I'm not sure how many people might read the whole thing, but one thing that's been picked up from that is this idea of the Great Replacement Theory. Have you all heard about this, the Great Replacement Theory? I'd love to hear your thoughts about that. I've got a couple of thoughts about it. Maybe we'll pick that up after the break. But before we do, let's talk to Corey in Upper Marlboro. How about you tell me what you think? You got a minute before we have to take a break, but I'd love to hear some of your thoughts.
Sure. Glad to be here on the line with you, David, and I'd love your show. I just want to give a couple of thoughts about this whole issue with the shooter. And the first thought is that it's really tragic, and I do think that he's a troubled young man, but I really believe that there's a spiritual issue here, but there's also an issue when it comes to the concept of race. Race as a concept in the United States, we have not dealt with that issue properly, and really, the construction of race itself is a part of the problem, because we're not seeing each other as human beings, but we're rather seeing people through these different lenses of race. And I mean it to say that obviously there's differences between each of the ethnic backgrounds, and of course we should celebrate those differences. But when we put people in the category of race in this country, unfortunately, because of the history, people are seen as inferior or superior. So I think we have to really look at this through God's eyes and see that, yes, we are different because God made us different, but we should be able to value each other in our humanity, but based on God's image in terms of him, being created in his image. And so I think also we're dealing with a spiritual, a demonic force here. Yeah. And the church really has to reckon with this. How does the church really deal with the issue of race? How do we deal with these tragedies when they happen? What's the response that the church has? And I really believe that we can address that.
Corey, so are you saying that simply by labeling something race, there's a dehumanization of the person?
So I would say there has been, because of the history of race itself, because if you look back in history in the United States, race as a concept was based on usually two things. One was based on the value of the person, skin color, and second thing, it was also based on economics. And so when you break things down that way, people are seen in those different groups as being inferior or superior. And so what the United States has to do, we have to deconstruct the whole concept of race and really look at it in terms of, we're all human, of course.
Sure.
But because we've built this system upon race itself, that's why we continue to see the same pattern and the same things going on, because we haven't dealt with the history of race, even when it comes down to the issue of even, for example, eugenics, dealing with, abortion. And I know that's not the topic today, but there's an ugly history behind that with Margaret Sanger.
Wow.
So we have to deconstruct all of the issue of race, and we have to deal with this spiritually from the church's standpoint.
And I think you're onto something there, in the sense that deconstructing race could only be a good thing because it helps us understand its building blocks better. When you think about what's the difference between race and ethnicity and your culture and your color, like all of those words sometimes just seem so interchangeable. To pull them apart is like pulling out Christmas lights, at Christmas time, the ball of lights is all intertwined and you don't know where one string ends and the other begins. But deconstructing race can really help us find out its building blocks. Brother Cornel West says that race is power plus color. If we look at power plus color, we'll really start to understand the issues of race. So we'll be right back to talk more right about this. Well, we're back here on Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. I'm Dave Heiliger. I'm filling in for Dr. Anderson today. Had a great conversation so far about here on Wisdom Wednesday about the shooting in Buffalo this past weekend, the tragic racist murder of 10 people. 3 others were injured at the Tops Grocery Market in Buffalo. And we've been talking about the wisdom of understanding the ideology of the Buffalo shooter. Was he just a lone wolf acting on his own, or is he part of a more common ideological pack? And so understanding the difference between whether or not we just see him as just one guy who was mentally disturbed, he was just one guy who was filled with evil, or do we say, you know what, he was filled with evil, he probably was mentally disturbed, but we have to understand there's an ideology that he was carrying out these heinous acts based on. And so the more we can understand that ideology, maybe we can see how it pops up in different places throughout our culture. And so we've been talking to a number of people, and we've got a number of other people on the line. So if you want to call in, you might be able to fit in, but 888-432-7434. I would love to have you join the conversation. We're going to go right to Grace in Baltimore, and I would love to hear what you have to say, Miss Grace.
Hello, good afternoon, Pastor Dave.
Hi there, Grace.
Hi. This is not my comfort spot, being on the air, but when I saw your face, I felt that I had to call in, and I'm grateful that we're going to a multicultural. We're going to a multicultural church together. We worship in this church that has people from so many cultures, and we're doing life together. And we know that this is a design by the Lord, and so to me, it's the most beautiful thing. When I go into my church and I look around and I'm seeing people of different complexion and various cultures, and we eat each other's food. And so when I'm hearing that this young man is 18 years old, and we hear of all this that's going on, and a lady called in from Silver Spring, and she mentioned spiritual aspect, and I can see nothing else but the enemy, because the way I was brought up, that you respect your elders, and I can imagine an 18-year-old looking at the majority of these people are seniors, and he would shoot a 70-something-year-old woman. He was out of ammunition. He reloaded, and I can't. It bothers my mind that how. It's as if you're not thinking these are humans. It's very hard for me I get very emotional when I think about it. And so I see beyond him and see that there is a darkness that allow people to this place where they can carry out these acts without the thought and the feelings. It has to be a greater power beyond them, because in my mind, I just can't, it's hard for me to process all of this. And
I'm right there with you, Miss
Sorry,
Grace.
go ahead.
No, I'm right there with you. And there's such a difference between the extreme acts of hatred that he carried out over the weekend, killing people as young as 32, but like you said, most of them were older. You have one person that was 32, then the next oldest person is 52, and then it's all the way up to 86 years old. And I just want to thank you so much for calling, Miss Grace. And as we're going forward in this, understanding what can we do to counteract these types of ideologies? Is it enough that we just speak out against it, and when something like this comes up, we say, we call out the spiritual side of it, and honestly, we call out the terrible, evil act, but what do we do to combat against the ideology side of it? How can we build a society beyond that? And so Miss Grace and I go to the same church here with Dr. Anderson. I'm a pastor here at Bridgeway Community Church, and Miss Grace and I get to fellowship together. Her as an African American woman, and me as a white man, and she knows my wife and my daughter, and we share our lives together, and that kind of relationship is definitely a counteracting force. Even Gracism being the overcoming force that really challenges those kinds of evil ideologies. But I think that's something we need to think about as well. So we speak out against the ideology and the mentality and the terrible spiritual forces, but then not just speak out against, but what do we actively do to build a different kind of society and relationship? And so I want to challenge us in that even. One of the ideologies that seems to be a thread through this is the ideology of the Great Replacement theory. And just to give a little bit of context of what that is, a French writer developed this theory back in the 90s and published it about 10 years ago. And this theory that's seen all throughout this guy's manifesto believes that there's a coordinated effort to eliminate the white population through mass immigration and decreasing white birth rates. And so believing that there is a mass effort to have some kind of genocidal effort against white people through the prevalence, power, and progress of Black and other cultural minorities in the United States and even throughout Europe. And so this guy's a French writer. He talks about it in the context of France, but it's been picked up all across the Western world, the white American world as well, and has been seen as possibly one of these ideological threads that ties things together. You know, I think in previous times when massive terrorist attack is carried out, we're all kind of waiting. Who's going to take responsibility for this act? Who's going to take responsibility? Which organization is going to take responsibility? Well, with something like this, when a white young man does something like this, I don't think we're necessarily asking that question. We kind of maybe more quickly as a culture put him out as a lone wolf. And I think maybe that's because the way the information is shared right now in these days, that it's shared more easily across groups without being a card-carrying member of a specific group. And so we can talk a little bit more about the Great Replacement Theory if you want. We'd love for you to call in and continue this conversation here on Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson.
What are you typing?
I'm looking for a church to watch online this Sunday.
Hey, you should check out bridgeway.cc.
Bridgeway? I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, I attended in person before COVID, but they still have great online services. Bridgeway is non-denominational, it's creative, it's multicultural, and the messages are powerful.
Awesome. I'm going to check them out.
Yes, their online services are amazing, and so are their in-person services. Worship is incredible. I mean, we're talking biblical messages that are practical, and they have creative elements too, like dances and dramas. It's really captivating and relevant.
Wow. Now, what about my kids?
Children's program is awesome. Our daughter can't wait to get online every Sunday. Now, how often do you hear that?
That sounds great.
Tell you what, they're live on Facebook and YouTube every Sunday. Which do you use?
Facebook.
Okay, cool. I'll set up a watch party for Sunday at 10. Be there.
Okay, I think you got a deal. I'll be there on Facebook at 10 Sunday morning.
Search for Bridgeway Community Church on YouTube and Facebook every Sunday at 8 a.m. or 10 a.m. or just go to bridgeway.cc. And feel free to visit us in person at 945 in Columbia or 1130 at our Owings Mills Reisterstown campus.
Have you ever driven through your neighborhood and saw that neighbors had their grass that was way too long? They had all kinds of clovers in the grass, and you're wishing as you drive silently, I wish they would mow their lawn. Well, guess what? Why don't you get them a gift? Call Laser Landscaping and let them cut the lawn for your neighbors. Go to Laser with a Z Landscaping LLC on Facebook, or give them a call if you want them to beautify your lawn. 240-516-4967 for those who live in the Prince George's County and surrounding areas. Their number, once again, 240-516-4967. It's Laser Landscaping, or just ask for the owner, Fidel, and make sure you tell Fidel that Dr. Anderson sent you.
We're back. Here we are on Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. I am not Dr. Anderson, as you can probably tell by my voice. And if you're watching us here on Facebook or YouTube by looking at me, probably a different face than you're normally accustomed to seeing here on the air. But I am privileged to join you today. My name's Dave Heiliger. I am the director of Gracism Global, Dr. Anderson's organization that is helping to build bridges across the divides of color, class, and culture all over the world. And so what I'd love to hear from you is some of your thoughts here on this Wisdom Wednesday as we reflect on the terrible killings that we heard about, read about, watched on the news on May 14th in Buffalo, New York at the grocery store. Race-based killing that killed 10 people and 11 of the victims were black. That's of the people that were killed and the people that were injured. So I'd love to hear from you. We're going to, in just a minute, go to Bernice out in Waldorf. But before I do that, I just wanted to say hi to the folks watching online. Dr. Anderson, thanks for chiming in there on Facebook. So would love to talk to you more as you guys interact with me through that chat box. But we're going to go right to Bernice over in Waldorf. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Miss Bernice.
Hello. Nice to hear you, to meet you. Now, can you hear me clearly?
I can. We hear you loud and clear. Loud and clear. Go right ahead.
So all I wanted to say was 2 points. I'm glad that you didn't say that this was mental health because ideology, that's different than mental illness. That's one. And the other one is you ask, what can we do to look and see, to stop these kind of actions. And one of the things is something that the cancel culture has taken away is that now when people do these things, they stop talking about the perpetrator and they talk about the people who were the victims, people who were killed. And I'm not saying that the people who were killed shouldn't be talked about, but the people who perpetrate these crimes, we need to know what their childhood was, what they were doing, and the things that were found and that brought them to this as adults.
Yes.
And maybe, especially like this young man, it doesn't matter what color they are. As far as I'm concerned, he's a kid. Mm-hmm. And so what went on, and so those things also need to be out in the media.
Yeah, and
this is what he was doing, and you spoke to that.
Yeah, so, thank you so much, Miss Bernice, for calling in on that. And I really feel like you're right. Sometimes we get right past the event of the killing of the news story, and once it goes out of the news story, we kind of just dismiss everything that happened, right? And what I hear you saying is that we should keep talking about this. We shouldn't just end it with, "Oh, that was a bad thing." Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Let's talk about what happened with this bad thing. And like you were asking, well, why? Why did this happen? What, was it mental illness? Was it his ideology and things like that? Yeah. We, what, especially as Christians, we do try to groom our children to grow up loving Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. From the time, some when they're in the belly, singing to them, talking about the Bible. We do that as Christians who believe the Bible. But then other people, even if they think that it's the Bible that they're teaching, but they're taught, from very young, or something happened. So then as a teenager, I split from my family and I went to this group, and now I'm believing what this group says because this is what resonates with me because these people care about me. And yes, somebody this color or whatever did this thing to me. Mm-hmm. So now, okay, there's a whole bunch of people who think this way. Well, I can think this way too. Yeah. And that's why it's important to talk about the perpetrator as well.
Thank you, Miss Bernice, for calling in. I'm really glad that you shared that, because what that forces us to do, or what that encourages us to do, what that invites us to do, is to zoom out, right? You can zoom out in a circumstance like this to get a little bit more of a wider perspective, to see where this person fits into a wider pattern. And if we zoom out and we say, no, there's no wider pattern to this, there hasn't been a history of violence against African Americans, and we would never get to that conclusion, right? When we zoom out and we see that there has been a pattern to that, then we really can start to understand, how do we make sure we don't repeat the pattern? And that's the most important part of the progress of this. Thanks for calling in, Miss Bernice. I'm gonna just say goodbye to you. And
okay,
we can
yeah. get on the train.
Well, please travel safe. Okay, travel safe. And we saw this even in when we were traveling to the Ukrainian border a couple of weeks ago to serve refugees coming out of Ukraine, and we asked these questions about tell us about the animosity between these nations and between these people groups, Hungary and Ukraine and Poland and Romania and Russia. Tell us about this. They would always start it like this, time and time again. They would say, 300 years ago, and then they would tell us the history. They would start out telling us the history of the relationship between these people groups. And I think sometimes we get to this point and in the United States and we see something like this and we're not willing to say, well, 300 years ago, this is where it started. And what it's progressed into is this abuse and this harm and this repeated action, and that's brought us to today. And if we can zoom out and maybe begin our explanations with the longer history, that can help us get the right perspective to place this young man in the right context of a pattern of abuse. And we've got a couple more minutes here. What I want to do is really quick. Stephanie, you've got 1 minute. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Stephanie from Washington, D.C. You got a quick minute for me?
Okay, yes. I just wanted to agree with what the lady said before me. And I think that these things have taken it happened long before these generations came, before his generation came, and he just embraced what he's learned. I think it's a learned behavior too. It's very sad because if you embrace, it's just like the man who sat at the well for 38 years. His mom was sick. He embraced his illness, and you can't embrace illness no matter what it is.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to interrupt you here. I'm so sorry. So sorry. We're gonna have to interrupt you there. We're going to a break, but I agree. This is a deep pattern that we're going to have to understand if we want to make sure it doesn't repeat again. We'll be right back. We're finishing up the show here on Real Talk with Dr. David Anderson. I'm Dave Heiliger, Director of Gracism Global. I get to work with Dr. Anderson, building bridges across deep divides of color, class, and culture all over the world. But it has been quite the show today. Those of you that we weren't able to get to on the line, I apologize deeply. We hope you call back another time to continue these conversations. And honestly, I'm just honored every single time I step into a conversation about very sensitive racial dynamics and very personal hurt and pain for people of color, that they're willing to engage with me in a conversation like this. I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me. You know, a white guy that's probably represents a lot of maybe some of the harm that you felt. I just wanted to say thank you for continuing to include me in a conversation like this. I don't take it lightly at all. And as we think back to what we've been talking about, the wisdom of understanding the Buffalo shooter's ideology, we've been looking at this question: was he acting as a lone wolf, or is he part of a more common ideological pack? And what I want us to, maybe as we conclude and get a little bit of wrap up on this topic, I want us to commit together to not just writing him off as mentally unstable. Sure, that might have been it. Not just he was filled with evil in his heart. There are other people that have those same challenges in their own lives, but there's a deep thread of a racist, white supremacist ideological foundation to what was the basis for why he went into that supermarket and killed 10 people and targeted Black Americans. And what I want us to do is not just speak out against that kind of ideology, that one that sees difference as a threat, but that we then go the step further with a gracist mentality that sees difference as essential to humanity, essential to following Christ. It's this essential aspect where we are incomplete without those that are different than ourselves. And we include people who are coming to this country from different nations, from different nationalities, from different ethnicities, that our lives, we don't just say we're about diversity, but we invite different people into our home. We intentionally choose activities in our life that put us around people that are different than us. And we live out this gracist life where we ask ourselves if we're truly standing with those that are facing some kind of racial abuse. Maybe we can carry out some of these sayings of a gracist where we begin to consider and lift and honor them in order to affirm that their prevalence, their power, their progress is something that we celebrate. And so I want to finish this show like Dr. Anderson did yesterday by reading a couple names. These were the 10 people who were killed. Roberta A. Drury, Margus D. Morrison, Andre McNeil, Aaron Salter Jr., Geraldine Talley, Celestine Cheney, Hayward Patterson, Catherine Massey, Pearl Young, Ruth Whitfield. Dear Jesus, we need you, and we pray that your blessing would be on those families that lost someone dear to them. We all feel that loss. Amen.
Father, help your children and don't let them fall by the side of the road, and teach them to love